The storm howled over the private runway, rain slicing sideways across the glowing tarmac. A Gulfstream G650 gleamed under the floodlights, its engines humming like a predator waiting to take off. Emily Carter stood on the slick concrete, one hand bracing her swollen belly, the other clutching the sleeve of her husband Andrew. "Please don't leave me like this," she whispered, voice trembling. Her eyes begged for mercy. Andrew's jaw tightened, irritation etched in every line of his face. "You're dragging me down, Emily. I have a life waiting, one you'll never fit into." At his side, Vanessa Hill smirked, her red lips curling in triumph. She looped her manicured hand around Andrew's arm as if staking her claim. The downpour thickened. Emily slipped, knees buckling, but when she clutched at Andrew's arm for balance, he shoved her. It wasn't a stumble, it was deliberate. Her body hit the ground with a sickening thud, the impact jolting through her womb. Pain exploded across her abdomen. Gasps erupted from nearby staff and passengers sheltered under umbrellas. Someone shouted for security. Emily pressed a trembling palm to her stomach. Warmth spread against her hand. Blood, a cry caught in her throat. She looked up through blurred vision, searching her husband's face for remorse. There was none. Only impatience. "Get up," Andrew barked, pulling Vanessa closer as though Emily's suffering was an inconvenience. "You're embarrassing me." The crowd buzzed in disbelief, phones rising, flashes sparking. Vanessa leaned into Andrew's ear, her whisper cutting through the storm. "She's nothing but baggage." Emily's head spun, her body weakening. She curled forward protectively over her unborn child. Her world felt as if it was shattering. Then, footsteps. Firm, purposeful, unhesitant, a tall man emerged from the shadows of the terminal, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead, his tailored coat heavy with water. Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire no one expected to see outside boardrooms and news headlines, was suddenly there, kneeling beside Emily. His voice was steady, commanding. "She's with me," he told the stunned onlookers. His eyes met Andrew's with a steel that silenced the jeers. "This woman is my wife, and if anyone lays another hand on her, they'll answer to me." The declaration cracked through the storm like thunder. Emily's dazed eyes widened. She tried to protest, but her lips could barely form words. Ethan slipped his arm under her shoulders, shielding her from the rain with his body. "You're safe now," he whispered low enough for only her to hear. Andrew's face blanched, rage and disbelief colliding. "She's mine," he snapped, voice nearly drowned by the roar of the jet engines. But Ethan only tightened his grip, lifting Emily gently but firmly. His gaze never wavered. Not anymore. The crowd erupted, some with cheers, others with gasps. Vanessa's smirk faltered. Cameras flashed faster, capturing the moment that would ignite headlines across the world. Emily clung weakly to Ethan's chest, her breath ragged, vision fading. The siren of an approaching ambulance wailed closer, and then a sharp contraction ripped through her body, tearing a scream from her lips. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside her. Was her baby coming tonight? Long before the storm at the airport, Emily Carter had lived a life so ordinary that no one could have predicted her fate. She was born in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, the daughter of a school librarian and a mechanic. Her parents taught her that dignity came from kindness and that strength often wore the face of silence. Emily grew up with secondhand clothes, home-cooked meals, and dreams that stretched far beyond the horizon of her small town. She excelled in literature, drawn to stories where heroines endured trials and rose stronger. College was a distant hope, yet she worked nights at a diner, saving every tip in a worn envelope. At 20, she earned a scholarship to study English education, the first in her family to step into a university classroom. That was where she met Andrew Carter. He wasn't wealthy then. He was a rising corporate salesman with a sharp smile, a polished suit, and promises that dazzled like glass under sunlight. Andrew swept her into a whirlwind of late-night drives, flowers left at her dorm door, and declarations of eternal love whispered under starlit skies. To Emily, who had known only modest affection, he seemed like the man she had prayed for. When Andrew proposed after a year, Emily's friends warned her he was ambitious to a fault. But she believed love could soften edges, and she said yes. Their wedding was simple, just family, a borrowed gown, and a rented hall strung with fairy lights. She thought she was stepping into a forever story. At first, their marriage was sweet. They lived in a tiny apartment where Emily cooked casseroles, graded papers, and waited for Andrew to return from work. He would come home with stories of deals closed and clients won, always talking about the future they were building. She believed him. She trusted him. When Emily discovered she was pregnant, she was terrified but hopeful. She imagined late nights rocking her baby to sleep, Andrew's hand steady on her shoulder, the three of them a little team against the world. For a brief moment, Andrew seemed thrilled. He talked about cribs and names, even kissed her belly as if he meant it. But ambition has sharp teeth. As the months passed, Andrew grew restless. He complained about bills, mocked her for working too little, and scoffed at the changes pregnancy brought to her body. His words, once tender, turned cutting. He spent more nights working late, returning home with cologne that wasn't hers lingering on his suit. Emily tried to ignore the whispers. She told herself stress had poisoned his spirit, and that the man she loved was still buried inside him. But deep down, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She was no longer his partner. She was his burden. Still, she held on. For the baby, for the vows, for the memory of who he once was. Her parents had taught her loyalty was sacred, and she clung to that lesson, even as Andrew drifted further away. The breaking point came when Vanessa appeared, a woman younger, hungrier, unashamed of her role as Andrew's mistress. Emily felt the knife twist, but she swallowed the pain. She carried her child, taught her classes, and prayed that love might still redeem him. She never imagined redemption would arrive, not from her husband, but from a stranger whose footsteps would one day thunder across a stormy runway. That stranger's name was Ethan Blackwell. Andrew Carter was not born into wealth. He grew up in a cramped apartment above a liquor store, the son of a bitter father who gambled away every paycheck, and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. From the start, Andrew vowed he would never be trapped in poverty again. He despised the smell of cheap beer, the sound of overdue bills being slammed on the table, and the humiliation of wearing secondhand sneakers that squeaked with every step. Ambition burned inside him like fire. In school, he was the boy who cut corners, but somehow charmed his way into passing grades. He wasn't the smartest, but he was persuasive. He could sell a failing project as genius and convince teachers to give him another chance. That knack for manipulation became his greatest weapon. After college, Andrew landed a sales job at a mid-sized tech firm. He worked long hours, not because of passion, but because he craved power. He learned how to flatter bosses, how to steal credit for others' ideas, how to make himself look indispensable. By 28, he had secured a promotion into management, and with it, a salary that gave him a taste of the life he'd always wanted. Emily had been his anchor during those early years. Her warmth softened the edges of his ambition. But as Andrew's income grew, so did his arrogance. The modest apartment no longer satisfied him. He wanted penthouses, tailored suits, luxury cars with leather interiors that smelled like conquest. Emily's casseroles and kind words began to feel small against the glitter of his new world. At corporate parties, Andrew flourished. He shook hands with executives, laughed too loudly at their jokes, and always had a glass of champagne in hand. The higher he climbed, the more he looked at Emily with disdain. She was still the teacher with ink-stained hands and simple clothes. She didn't fit the glossy picture he was painting for himself. The final shift came the day he met Vanessa Hill. She was an ambitious junior associate at his company, young, stylish, and hungry for advancement. Where Emily saw Andrew's flaws, Vanessa fed his ego. She told him he was brilliant, destined for greatness. She became the mirror that reflected the man he wanted to believe he was. It started with lunches, then late-night meetings, and soon an affair. Emily, carrying his child, was pushed further into the shadows, while Vanessa became his glittering secret. But Andrew wasn't ashamed. He paraded Vanessa at exclusive clubs, whispered promises into her ear, and told himself he deserved it. After all, he had clawed his way up from nothing. Didn't he earn the right to enjoy everything life could offer? The arrogance grew dangerous. He gambled company funds, bribed clients with lavish gifts, and lied to investors. Each risk made him bolder. Each win convinced him he was untouchable. He looked at Emily not as a wife, but as a reminder of the small, weak life he wanted to erase. By the time Emily begged him at the airport, Andrew had already rewritten his story. In his mind, she wasn't a partner. She was an anchor dragging him down. And anchors, he believed, were meant to be cut loose. But fate has a way of humbling men who mistake cruelty for strength. Andrew was about to learn that his greatest downfall would come not from enemies, but from the woman he betrayed. The night of the airport storm was not an accident. Andrew had orchestrated it with precision, determined to make a statement to both Emily and the world. His Gulfstream G650 was waiting on the runway, polished to a mirror sheen, the ultimate symbol of the success he craved. Vanessa clung to his arm, draped in a designer trench coat that glistened in the rain, every bit the mistress who believed she had already won. Emily stood by the terminal doors, her coat thin against the cold wind, one hand over her belly, the other clutching the edge of her small purse. Her face was pale, exhaustion weighing on her features, but her eyes held a glimmer of desperate hope. She thought perhaps she could reason with him, remind him of the life growing inside her. "Andrew, please," she called out, her voice breaking as she stumbled forward across the slick pavement. "I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. Don't leave me like this." Andrew's stride didn't falter. His eyes, once filled with warmth when they looked at her, now held only disdain. "You're nothing but dead weight, Emily," he snapped, pulling Vanessa closer. "I have a future, and you're not part of it." The small crowd of staff and security froze. Their eyes darted between the glamorous couple and the broken wife chasing after them. Rain poured harder, streaking mascara down Emily's cheeks as she reached him, grabbing his arm for balance. That was when Andrew shoved her. The push wasn't gentle, wasn't a slip of temper. It was deliberate. Emily's body hit the ground with a sickening force. She gasped, a sharp cry tearing from her throat as pain radiated through her abdomen. Her hand flew to her stomach, and when she pulled it back, crimson stained her palm. The color glowed under the harsh runway lights, shocking the onlookers into silence. "Andrew," she screamed, voice echoing across the runway. But her husband only shook his head, face twisted in disgust. "You should have stayed home," he spat. "Now look at you. Pathetic." Vanessa smirked, her eyes flicking down at Emily with cold amusement. "Let her rot," she whispered into Andrew's ear, loud enough for Emily to hear. Phones lifted. Cameras flashed. Within seconds, the scene was captured. The powerful businessman abandoning his pregnant wife in the rain while clinging to his mistress. Gasps rippled through the crowd, whispers spreading like wildfire. Emily tried to stand, but another wave of pain crushed her strength. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed again, sobbing. "The baby," she whispered, voice barely audible. And then through the storm came footsteps. Not hurried, but firm, deliberate, cutting through the chaos like a blade. A man emerged from the shadows of the terminal, his figure tall and commanding. The storm seemed to pause around him. It was Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire no one expected to see there. His eyes locked on Emily, then flicked to Andrew with a sharpness that could slice steel. "You've done enough," Ethan said, his voice calm yet thunderous. He stepped between Emily and Andrew, kneeling beside her. Rain soaked his coat, but he didn't care. He lifted her gently into his arms, shielding her trembling body from the downpour. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, Ethan declared, "This woman is my wife, and I will protect her with everything I have." The crowd gasped. Andrew's face drained of color, cameras flashed wildly, and Emily, clinging to consciousness, realized the world had just witnessed the moment her life, and Andrew's empire, began to unravel. The ambulance tore through the flooded streets, siren wailing like a wounded animal. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered against Emily's pale skin. She lay strapped to the stretcher, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. Every contraction hit like a wave crashing against a fragile shore. Her trembling hands clutched at Ethan's sleeve, as though his presence alone tethered her to life. "Please, my baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the rain still clinging to her hair. "Don't let anything happen to my baby." Ethan leaned close, his tone steady even as fear carved lines across his face. "You're safe. Both of you are safe. I promise." He pressed her hand firmly against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat, strong and unwavering. "Hold on, Emily, I'm not going anywhere." The paramedics exchanged glances. "She's dilating too fast," one muttered. "This baby's coming tonight whether we're ready or not." Emily's sobs deepened. She had dreamt of a quiet hospital room, Andrew by her side, whispering comfort as she brought their child into the world. Instead, her husband had left her bleeding on the pavement. The man she once trusted had chosen another woman over his unborn child. The stretcher jolted as the ambulance swerved. Emily cried out, arching against the straps. "Why, Andrew?" she gasped. "Why wasn't I enough?" Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. His eyes softened, full of something fierce and protective. "Don't waste another breath on him. He doesn't deserve it. You and your child are what matters now." By the time they burst into the emergency ward, chaos erupted. Doctors and nurses rushed to meet them, wheeling Emily down stark hallways that smelled of antiseptic and desperation. "Severe abdominal trauma, possible placental abruption," one doctor shouted. "We need a delivery room prepped, now." Emily's panic sharpened. Her cries filled the sterile space. "Please save my baby," she pleaded, her voice raw and desperate. "Don't let him die because of me." The nurses pressed oxygen over her mouth, but her wide, terrified eyes stayed fixed on Ethan. She tried to lift her hand toward him, and he caught it instantly. "I'm right here," he assured her, walking alongside the stretcher, even as orderlies tried to push him back. His presence became her anchor. "You're not alone, Emily. Do you hear me? Not anymore." The doors swung open to the delivery room. Machines beeped, gloves snapped, orders flew like bullets in the air. Emily screamed again, clutching Ethan's hand until her knuckles turned white. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the life inside her, the one pure thing Andrew had tried to discard. Her chest heaved as another contraction ripped through her. "Tell me, he'll live," she begged the doctor, sobbing so hard her voice cracked. "Please, tell me my baby will live." The doctor glanced at Ethan, then back at Emily. "We'll do everything we can." Ethan leaned close, his voice steady as stone. "He's going to live, Emily, and so are you. I won't let go of either of you." And as the monitors screamed and Emily's body convulsed with the fight of her life, the storm outside pounded harder, echoing the storm raging inside her fragile heart. While Emily's cries echoed through the sterile hospital ward, Andrew Carter was raising a glass of champagne in a penthouse suite overlooking the storm-drenched city. He leaned back in a leather chair, his tuxedo jacket tossed aside, his tie loosened. Vanessa Hill lounged across from him, curled like a cat on the velvet sofa, her red dress clinging to every curve. "To new beginnings," she purred, clinking her glass against his. The crystal rang out, mocking in its cheer. Andrew smirked, draining his drink in one swallow. "To freedom," he corrected. "No more whining about bills, no more dragging weight around. Emily was holding me back. Now I can focus on the life I deserve." Vanessa tilted her head, her eyes glinting. "And what about the baby?" Andrew waved a dismissive hand, pouring another glass. "Dead weight too. That kid was never part of the plan. I didn't fight my way up from nothing to get stuck with diapers and midnight feedings. She'll figure it out, or she won't. Either way, not my problem." Vanessa laughed softly, though there was an edge to it. "Cold, Andrew? Even for you." He leaned forward, setting his glass down with a sharp clink. "You think I care what people say? I've spent my whole life clawing out of the gutter. Now I've got money, power, connections. Emily was just a shadow of who I used to be. You?" His hand slid along Vanessa's thigh. "You're my future." Vanessa arched a brow but didn't pull away. She had played the game long enough to know what Andrew really meant. She was his accessory, proof that he could upgrade his life. And for now, that suited her. Lightning flashed across the skyline, illuminating the smug curve of Andrew's mouth. He was already envisioning the headlines he wanted. "Carter Enterprises expands global reach." He imagined himself photographed on yachts, at galas, at boardrooms, Vanessa on his arm, Emily erased from existence. But beneath the thunder, a different storm was brewing. Already, whispers of the airport incident were spreading online. Passengers and staff had caught the shove on their phones, posting grainy videos of a pregnant woman crumpling onto wet pavement. The images were blurry, but the cruelty was unmistakable. By dawn, those clips would ignite across social media, Andrew's face branded with shame he hadn't yet felt. For now, though, he reveled in ignorance. Vanessa poured more champagne, curling into his side. "So what's next?" she asked. "Now that you've cut her loose." Andrew chuckled, his tone dripping with arrogance. "What's next? I rise higher than anyone thought possible. By the time Emily even figures out how to stand on her feet, I'll be untouchable." Vanessa leaned into him, but her eyes darted toward the rain-lashed windows. She had seen powerful men fall before, and something in the way Andrew dismissed Emily unsettled her. A woman cast aside with nothing left to lose could be more dangerous than 1,000 rivals. But Andrew Carter didn't notice the flicker of doubt on his mistress's face. He lifted his glass once more, savoring the taste of his imagined victory. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Emily was fighting for her life, and the world was about to turn against him. The delivery room blazed with urgency, every corner humming with controlled chaos. Bright lights flooded the space, casting harsh shadows across the faces of doctors and nurses as they moved with sharp precision. Emily lay on the bed, her hospital gown clinging to her with sweat and fear. Her hair stuck to her forehead in damp strands, her knuckles white as she clutched Ethan's hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Her voice cracked between contractions. "Please, don't let me lose him." Ethan bent closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. His voice, low and steady, drowned out the clamor of medical orders around them. "You won't. You hear me, Emily? You're stronger than this storm. Your son is stronger too." The monitor beeped in erratic bursts. One of the nurses glanced at the screen, her lips tightening. "Fetal heart rate dropping," she announced. The doctor immediately barked orders. "We need to move fast. Prep for emergency delivery. If we don't act now, both mother and child are at risk." Emily's chest heaved. Terror gripped her lungs like a vice. She could feel her body betraying her, contracting too soon, too violently. She thought of Andrew, his shove, his sneer, his cold words. Rage flickered through the pain, a surge of determination not to let his cruelty steal the one thing she still had. The doctor leaned over her. "Emily, I need you to push when I tell you. Do you understand?" Tears streamed down her face. "I'm scared." Ethan's grip tightened around hers, his thumb brushing against her damp skin. "Then borrow my courage," he whispered fiercely. "I'll carry it for both of you." The next contraction tore through her, and Emily screamed, her body arching against the bed. The sound was raw, primal, echoing down the sterile hallways. Nurses pressed on her abdomen, guiding her strength, while the doctor urged, "Push, Emily, now!" She pushed with every ounce of strength left in her. Her vision blurred with tears, the room spinning, but she refused to stop. Each cry, each heave was a battle between despair and hope. Suddenly, the shrill cry of an infant pierced the room. It was thin, weak, but it was life. Emily collapsed back against the bed, sobbing with relief. Her arms trembled as the nurse placed the tiny bundle on her chest. The baby's skin was mottled, his breath shallow, but his tiny fingers curled around her gown as if clinging to her with the same desperation she had clung to Ethan. Emily's tears soaked the newborn's soft hair. "My baby, my beautiful boy." Ethan's eyes glistened as he leaned down, brushing a tender kiss against Emily's temple. He gazed at the fragile child, awe softening every line of his usually composed face. "He's here. You both made it." The doctor, still stern, cautioned, "The baby will need intensive care. He's early and fragile. We'll move him to the neonatal unit immediately." Emily's heart clenched as the nurse carefully lifted the infant from her chest. "Take care of him," she whispered, her voice cracking. Ethan squeezed her hand, his eyes locked on hers. "I'll make sure he gets everything he needs. You're not alone anymore, Emily. Not for a single moment." And as her son was wheeled away, Emily closed her eyes, clinging to Ethan's words like a lifeline, unaware that outside those walls, the world was already turning against Andrew Carter. While Emily clung to life and her fragile newborn in the hospital, another storm was erupting in the digital world. The shove at the airport had not gone unnoticed. Dozens of witnesses had recorded it, their phones capturing every shocking detail. The pregnant woman's desperate plea, the brutal push, the blood on her hands, and the cold indifference on Andrew Carter's face. By midnight, the first video hit social media. Within minutes, hashtags exploded. Airport betrayal, pregnant wife pushed, Andrew Carter exposed. The grainy clip played on loop, showing Andrew turning away with Vanessa on his arm while Emily crumpled to the ground. The sight ignited collective outrage. "Is this man human?" one comment blazed. "She's carrying his child and he just throws her away like trash. This monster has a mistress and no soul." News outlets picked it up within the hour. By dawn, Emily's name was trending nationwide. The headlines were merciless. Corporate climber shoves pregnant wife in storm. Mistress watches. Talk shows replayed the clip, anchors shaking their heads in disgust. In the boardrooms Andrew once dominated, whispers turned to alarm. Investors who once praised his ruthless drive now questioned his judgment. If he treats his own wife like that, one executive muttered on a leaked call, what does he do to his employees, to us? Meanwhile, Vanessa scrolled through the storm of fury with trembling fingers. Her glamorous photos with Andrew, once flooded with compliments, now drowned in venom. Homewrecker. Disgrace. Get out while you can. Her stomach twisted as she realized the world wasn't just condemning Andrew, it was dragging her down with him. Andrew, however, refused to see the walls closing in. Sitting in his office the next morning, he slammed the newspaper onto his desk. The front page screamed his downfall. Businessman pushes pregnant wife at airport. Caught on camera. This is garbage, he growled, pacing like a caged animal. A bad headline will blow over. Vanessa, pale and shaken, didn't answer. She knew better. The public wasn't just angry, it was enraged. And once rage caught fire online, there was no extinguishing it. In contrast, the hospital where Emily lay recovering was flooded with flowers, cards, and messages of support. Strangers who had never heard her name before now called her a symbol of resilience. Stay strong, Emily, one note read. The world is on your side. Ethan Blackwell watched it all unfold from a discreet distance. He sat by Emily's bedside, his phone buzzing with updates from his media team. The story is everywhere, his assistant whispered. Ethan glanced at Emily, her face pale against the pillow, her newborn son fighting for every breath in the neonatal ward. This isn't just a scandal, Ethan said quietly. This is a reckoning. And he was right. Sponsors began pulling out of Andrew's ventures. A luxury brand released a statement. We do not associate with men who harm women. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. His empire, once built on charm and manipulation, trembled under the weight of public fury. And while Andrew screamed at his collapsing world, Emily, unaware, held on to her fragile son, destined to rise from the ashes of the betrayal that nearly destroyed her. The days after the storm blurred into a haze of pain and quiet resilience. Emily lay in the hospital bed, her body weak, stitched with exhaustion from a battle she never thought she'd fight so soon. Each morning, she woke to the antiseptic sting of the ward, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the hollow ache of absence when her newborn was taken to the neonatal unit for observation. Every movement sent ripples of soreness through her frame. Yet every time she heard the faint cries of babies in nearby rooms, her heart clenched with determination. She whispered to herself, "Hold on for him. Be strong for him." Ethan Blackwell never left her side. He wasn't family, yet the staff treated him as though he were her guardian. His presence was constant. A quiet chair pulled close to her bed, fresh flowers arriving daily, hot meals replaced untouched when she was too weak to eat. His schedule as a billionaire CEO, once measured by deals and conferences, bent entirely around Emily's recovery. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the window, Ethan sat reading reports on his tablet while Emily stirred awake. Her voice was fragile, breaking the silence. "Why are you still here?" He set the tablet aside immediately. "Because you shouldn't be alone. Not now, not after everything you've endured." Her eyes welled with tears she tried to suppress. "I don't understand. Andrew, he should have been here. He should have been the one to hold my hand." Ethan's gaze hardened, though his tone remained gentle. "Andrew made his choice, and now you have to make yours. You can either drown in the pain he gave you, or you can fight to rise above it. For yourself, for your child." Emily turned her face toward the ceiling, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Ethan. I don't know how to do this alone." "You won't be alone," he said firmly, leaning closer. "I'll make sure of it." The following afternoon, a nurse wheeled Emily into the neonatal ward. She wore a pale blue gown, her hair brushed back by trembling fingers. Her son lay inside an incubator, tubes and wires attached to his tiny body. Emily pressed her hand to the glass, her lips quivering. "He looks so fragile," she whispered. Ethan stood beside her, his hand hovering just above her shoulder, respectful yet protective. "Fragile doesn't mean weak," he said softly. "He's a fighter, just like his mother." The nurse smiled kindly. "He's improving every day. He'll grow stronger because you're here." For the first time in days, a faint smile touched Emily's lips. She whispered through the glass, "Mommy's here, little one. Mommy's not leaving you." That night, as she returned to her bed, Emily felt a flicker of hope pierce through the fog of despair. Ethan caught that glimmer in her eyes and felt something shift inside him. And while Emily began the long road to healing, Ethan silently vowed that Andrew Carter would never again have the power to break her or her child. The morning after the scandal broke, Andrew Carter stormed into his office, convinced he could crush the flames with sheer arrogance. The glass tower that bore his name had always been his fortress, a place where deals were struck and rivals silenced. But today, the air felt different. Assistants avoided his eyes, phones rang unanswered, and whispers trailed in his wake like smoke from a dying fire. He slammed his briefcase onto the mahogany desk, his reflection staring back from the glossy surface. His phone buzzed with call after call, board members, investors, even old allies demanding explanations. He ignored them all. Instead, he poured himself a whiskey, though it was barely 10 in the morning. Vanessa entered quietly, sunglasses shielding her face even indoors. She tossed a folded newspaper onto his desk. The headlines screamed in bold letters, "Corporate Shark Pushes Pregnant Wife, Caught on Camera." Beneath it, the photo, Andrew sneering, Emily crumpled on the ground, rain streaking her face like tears. "They're calling you a monster," Vanessa said flatly. Andrew scoffed, though his grip on the glass tightened. "People love outrage. It'll blow over in a week." But as if to mock him, his office phone rang. He snatched it up. "This is Carter." The voice on the other end was cold, measured. "This is the chairman. We're calling an emergency board meeting. Effective immediately. You're suspended from your position pending investigation." Andrew's jaw clenched. "You can't do that. This company is mine." "Not anymore," the chairman replied. "You've become a liability. Investors are pulling out. We can't risk being tied to your scandal." The line went dead. He hurled the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. Vanessa flinched, removing her sunglasses. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "Andrew, this is bad. Brands are severing ties. The public hates you. Even my modeling contracts are being canceled because of you." He turned on her, his voice dripping venom. "So now you're worried about your career? Don't forget who pulled you into this world. Without me, you'd still be serving drinks at industry parties." Her lips curled into a sneer. "And without me, you'd still be chained to that boring little wife, pretending you cared about family." The words cut deeper than she intended. For the first time, Andrew's confidence faltered. He remembered Emily's face at the airport, pale, desperate, full of betrayal. The image haunted him, though he shoved it aside with another gulp of whiskey. By midday, the damage multiplied. Social media campaigns called for boycotts. A luxury car brand released a statement, "We sever all sponsorship with Andrew Carter, effective immediately." His inbox flooded with rejections, cancellations, and threats of lawsuits. He staggered to the window, staring down at the city that once bowed to him. The streets swarmed with people who had already judged him, condemned him. His empire was crumbling, not with the crash of thunder, but with the steady, merciless pull of public outrage. Vanessa stood behind him, arms folded, her silence louder than any accusation. And for the first time, Andrew Carter realized the world was no longer his to command. It was slipping into the hands of the very woman he tried to destroy. The neonatal intensive care unit glowed with soft blue lights, machines humming in a fragile symphony of survival. Tiny bodies fought colossal battles inside transparent incubators, each breath measured by blinking monitors and cautious nurses. Among them lay Emily's son, swaddled in wires and tubes, his chest rising and falling with delicate determination. Emily pressed her forehead to the glass, her palms trembling as she whispered, "My brave little fighter." Her eyes traced every fragile detail, his impossibly small fingers, his tiny lips pursed in silent effort. She had carried him for 6 months, dreamed of lullabies and nursery walls, never imagining their first days together would be a war for air. A nurse stepped beside her. "He's stable for now," the woman said softly. "Every hour he holds on is a victory. Don't lose hope." Emily nodded, though her throat ached from holding back sobs. "Can I touch him?" she asked timidly. The nurse smiled gently. "Through the port, yes, just one finger. It helps babies feel safe." Emily slid her hand through the small opening and brushed the tip of her finger against her son's hand. To her astonishment, his minuscule fingers curled instinctively around hers. A sob broke free from her chest. "You know me," she whispered. "You know Mommy's here." Behind her, Ethan stood in silence, his tall frame somehow humbled by the sight. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, commanded boardrooms filled with titans, yet nothing had ever gripped him the way this scene did. A fragile child clinging to life, and a mother pouring her soul into a single touch. Emily turned slightly, her eyes shimmering. "What if I can't do this, Ethan? What if I'm not enough?" He moved closer, his voice steady, almost reverent. "Emily, you've already given him everything. Your strength, your fight, your love. That's more than enough. And you won't do this alone, not while I'm here." She looked back at her son, her tears falling freely. For the first time since the airport, the crushing weight of abandonment eased. Where Andrew had pushed her into despair, Ethan was holding her together with unwavering devotion. Hours slipped by. Emily refused to leave her baby's side, singing softly through the glass, telling him stories of the life waiting for him beyond the machines. Ethan brought her food, blankets, anything to keep her strength up. He never pressed her, never intruded, just stayed, a quiet fortress of support. When the doctor finally entered, his expression was serious but not without hope. "Your son is fragile, but he's fighting harder than most preemies. With care, he has a real chance." Emily clasped her hands, whispering a prayer of gratitude. She turned to Ethan, her voice quivering. "I don't deserve all this help from you." Ethan's gaze was unwavering. "You deserve far more than you've ever been given. And one day, Emily, you'll believe that too." Her heart clenched, torn between the scars of betrayal and the strange new warmth stirring inside her. She glanced once more at her son, his tiny fingers twitching around her own. And in that sterile, glowing room, Emily made a vow. No matter the storms outside, she and her son would rise, and no man would ever break them again. Andrew Carter had built his career on the art of persuasion. When problems arose, he didn't solve them. He spun them. Lies became half-truths became stories, and stories became reputations polished enough to fool investors. So when the scandal exploded online, Andrew fell back on the one skill he trusted more than anything: manipulation. His penthouse had been transformed into a makeshift war room. Publicists huddled over laptops, phones buzzed with incoming calls, and half-empty wine glasses littered the marble counter. Andrew paced like a caged predator, his shirt untucked, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless fury. "We control the narrative," he barked, slamming his palm against the table. "We frame Emily as unstable, overwhelmed by pregnancy hormones. The footage doesn't show the full story. People are gullible. They'll believe what we tell them." One PR consultant hesitated. "Sir, the footage is clear. You shoved a visibly pregnant woman. No amount of spin will erase that image." Andrew's glare could have cut glass. "Then we paint her as manipulative. Say she staged it. Women cry, people believe them. It's an old trick. But now we say she wanted sympathy. That billionaire, what's his name? Blackwell? He's her accomplice. She planned this to humiliate me." The room fell into uneasy silence. Even Vanessa, usually smug at his side, shifted uncomfortably. "Andrew, that sounds desperate. People aren't blind. They saw you push her." He rounded on her, his voice sharp as a whip. "And what, Vanessa? You think they'll take your word over mine? You're in this as deep as I am. Don't forget whose arm you were clinging to in that video." Her cheeks flushed with anger, but she bit her tongue. She knew better than to provoke him when his temper flared. One consultant finally spoke, voice trembling. "We could lean into remorse, issue an apology, say you lost your temper, that you regret it." Andrew cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Apologize? To her? To the woman who shackled me with a baby I never wanted? No, I don't beg, I don't crawl, I win." But even as he spat the words, his phone buzzed with another alert. Another sponsor pulls out. Stock prices plunging. His empire, once untouchable, was unraveling with every passing hour. Vanessa lit a cigarette, exhaling a curl of smoke toward the ceiling. "Maybe you should think about how far you're willing to fall, Andrew. Because right now, the world doesn't see a winner. They see a monster." Her words stung, but he shoved the thought aside, clinging to his delusion. "I built everything from nothing. I can rebuild. I'll crush Emily and that billionaire. No one humiliates me and walks away unscathed. But outside the penthouse walls, the tide had already turned. Emily's story had become a rallying cry, and Ethan Blackwell's silent support only amplified it. And while Andrew plotted in arrogance, the truth was spreading faster than any lie he could invent. Preparing to deliver a blow his silver tongue could never undo. The first time Emily saw her name on the news, she felt exposed, as though the entire world had been invited into her most private humiliation. Lying in her hospital bed, she trembled when the nurse switched on the television. Her face filled the screen, rain-soaked, tear-streaked, clutching her belly as Andrew turned his back. The caption read, "Pregnant wife abandoned. America demands justice." At first, shame burned through her. She wanted to hide, to pull the blanket over her head and vanish. But then the segment changed. Footage of strangers holding candles, gathering outside the hospital, filled the screen. People she had never met carried signs that read, "Stand with Emily and no more silence." Her lips parted in disbelief. "They're here? For me?" The nurse smiled gently. "Not just here. All over the country. You're not alone anymore." Messages poured in. Cards stacked on her bedside table, flowers filled the corners of her room, and letters arrived daily. Some were from women who had lived through betrayal. Others came from fathers promising to raise their sons better. One note, scrawled in a child's handwriting, read, "Stay strong, Emily. My mom says you're a hero." Each word fed something inside her that Andrew had tried to starve, her sense of worth. For months, she had felt invisible, dismissed as nothing more than an inconvenience. Now, voices she had never known lifted her higher than she ever thought she could stand. One evening, Ethan found her reading through a pile of letters, tears streaking her cheeks. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered. "They don't even know me." He crouched beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. "They see your courage, Emily. You fought through cruelty, humiliation, and pain, and you still stood up. That's what people are responding to. You're not just one woman's story, you've become every woman's fight." Her heart swelled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "I'm not strong, Ethan. I'm just surviving." His gaze softened, unwavering. Survival is strength, and now the world knows it too. The following day, the hospital staff wheeled her to the NICU. When she entered, a quiet cheer rose from families gathered in the ward. Parents nodded to her with tears in their eyes, whispering encouragement. One mother with tired eyes clasped Emily's hand and said, "Because of you, I have the courage to leave my abusive husband. Thank you." Emily's breath caught. For the first time, she realized her suffering had created ripples beyond herself. She wasn't just fighting for her baby anymore. She was part of something larger, a wave of change. That night, as she sat by her son's incubator, she whispered a vow. "You'll grow up in a world where women don't stay silent. I'll make sure of it." Ethan watched her, pride flickering in his eyes. He saw not the broken woman from the airport, but the beginnings of a leader. Someone whose scars would shine brighter than Andrew's hollow triumphs ever could. And as Emily kissed the glass of the incubator, the woman Andrew tried to erase was being reborn, stronger, braver, and no longer afraid. By the end of the week, Andrew Carter's empire, once a gleaming tower of glass and steel, was cracking under the weight of his scandal. What he had spent years building with manipulation and ruthless ambition was now unraveling in real time, streamed live on every major network. Shareholders convened an emergency meeting, their faces grim and voices sharp. One after another, they demanded his resignation. "You've destroyed the brand," one board member spat across the polished table. "Our stock has plummeted 30% in 3 days. Every sponsor has abandoned us. You've become toxic." Andrew, sweating through his tailored suit, slammed his fist on the table. "This company exists because of me. Without me, you'd all still be nobodies. You can't strip me of what I created." But his arrogance only fueled their fury. Another member slid a document across the table, an official vote of no confidence. Cameras flashed outside the boardroom as security escorted him out, his protests echoing uselessly down the marble hallways. By that afternoon, news outlets erupted with the story. Andrew Carter removed as CEO. Company distances itself from scandal. Anchors recounted every detail of the viral video, juxtaposed with footage of Emily recovering in the hospital. The contrast between Andrew's cruelty and Emily's quiet resilience painted him as a villain in high definition. Vanessa tried to stand by him, but the glamour quickly soured. Paparazzi hounded her with vicious questions. How does it feel to destroy a family? Are you proud of standing beside a man who abandoned his pregnant wife? Contracts vanished overnight, brands severing ties with her as swiftly as they had with him. Her once coveted modeling career collapsed like glass shattering on marble. At home, Andrew drowned his rage in liquor, watching his empire slip through his fingers. Every news channel replayed his downfall. Clips of him shoving Emily at the airport were slowed, zoomed, analyzed by body language experts who called it premeditated aggression. Talk show hosts mocked him. Protesters gathered outside his penthouse chanting, "Justice for Emily." He hurled a glass at the screen, shattering it in a spray of whiskey and shards. "She ruined me," he snarled, pacing like a beast in a cage. "That woman turned the whole world against me." But even in his fury, he knew it wasn't just Emily. It was Ethan Blackwell. The billionaire's silent declaration claiming Emily as his wife on the runway had tipped the scales. Andrew saw it now. He wasn't just fighting a betrayed woman. He was fighting a man with limitless resources, a man the public adored, a man who had already stepped into the role Andrew had thrown away. The irony burned him alive. While Emily lay fragile but surrounded by love, Andrew stood isolated in the ruins of his kingdom. The man who had once boasted of being untouchable was now the most despised name in the city. And as the storm outside his windows mirrored the chaos in his soul, Andrew realized his fall had only just begun. The worst was yet to come. The neonatal unit became a second home for Ethan Blackwell. Each morning, he arrived in a tailored suit but left his boardroom persona at the door. He slipped into the hospital like any ordinary man, carrying coffee for the nurses and fresh flowers for Emily. To the world, he was a billionaire. To her, in those fragile days, he was simply the man who showed up when no one else did. Emily's son, tiny, fragile, yet stubbornly alive, was slowly gaining strength. Every day his cries grew louder, his breath steadier. Emily sat for hours by the incubator, whispering lullabies and stories about the life she hoped to give him. Ethan often stood behind her, quiet, hands in his pockets, watching the bond between mother and child unfold like a miracle. One evening, Emily turned to him with exhaustion in her eyes. "You don't have to stay, Ethan. You have a company to run, a life to live. I don't want to be your burden." His answer came without hesitation. "Emily, you're not a burden. You never could be. You and your son, you're the only part of my life right now that feels real." Her lips parted, stunned by the sincerity in his voice. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not even Andrew in their happiest days. Later that night, a nurse encouraged Emily to try skin-to-skin contact with her baby. Nervously, she cradled the tiny bundle against her chest. Tears filled her eyes as she felt the faint rhythm of his heart against hers. "He knows me," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes softening. "Of course he does. He knows his mother is the bravest woman alive." Emily looked up at him, her cheeks flushed with emotion. Would you like to hold him?" Ethan froze, startled by the offer. He had signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking. But this made his hands tremble. The nurse carefully guided the baby into his arms. Ethan held the fragile child as though cradling the most precious treasure on earth. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and then nestled into his chest. Ethan's throat tightened. "He's perfect." Emily watched, her heart swelling at the sight. For the first time in weeks, warmth replaced the hollow ache inside her. The image of Ethan holding her son etched itself into her soul, an image she never expected to want, but now couldn't forget. That night, as she settled back into bed, Ethan remained at her side. He read aloud from one of the books she loved, his deep voice filling the quiet room. Emily drifted off to sleep with her baby safe in the NICU, and Ethan's steady presence beside her. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, something unspoken had begun to grow. A bond forged not from wealth or power, but from love, trust, and the fragile miracle of a child who had survived the storm. Vanessa Hill had always believed she was clever enough to ride the wave of Andrew Carter's success. He promised her luxury, influence, and a seat beside him at the table of power. But now, instead of champagne galas, she was trapped inside his penthouse, curtains drawn to block out flashing cameras and protesters chanting Emily's name on the street below. The glamour had rotted into disgrace. Her modeling contracts had been terminated overnight, designers pulled their gowns from her closet, and every invitation that once bore her name vanished, as if she had never existed. The world wasn't dazzled by Andrew anymore, and by extension, it despised her too. She sat at the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, her feed flooded with venom. Homewrecker. Shame on you. You stood there laughing while he shoved his wife. Each comment cut deeper, the adoration she once enjoyed replaced by rage. Andrew stormed into the room half drunk, tie hanging loose around his neck. They're turning on me, he barked. The board betrayed me, the press crucified me, but I'll claw my way back. They'll regret ever crossing Andrew Carter. Vanessa looked up, her patience fraying. Andrew, wake up. You're finished. Every brand, every investor, every so-called friend has left you. You can't spin your way out of this. His eyes narrowed. So what, you're giving up on me too? She stood, her voice sharp. I gave up everything for you. My career, my reputation, gone. And for what? To watch you destroy yourself? To stand by while the world sees me as a villain? He sneered, stepping closer. Don't act like you're innocent. You loved the attention. You loved being paraded around like a trophy. Her temper snapped. At least I didn't push a pregnant woman into the ground. That's on you, Andrew. Not me. And now everyone knows what kind of monster you really are. His face darkened, rage flickering like a dangerous flame. Careful, Vanessa. Don't forget who made you. She met his glare with defiance she had never dared before. No, Andrew, you didn't make me. You ruined me. And I won't go down with you. For the first time, silence hung heavy between them. Andrew's bluster faltered, the truth in her words cutting deeper than any insult. He realized too late that Vanessa's loyalty, fragile as glass, had finally shattered. That night, Vanessa packed her bags. As cameras flashed outside, she slipped into a waiting car, her head held high. By morning, tabloids screamed with new headlines. Mistress abandons disgraced CEO. Vanessa Hill speaks out. Her statement was short but devastating. I was blinded by ambition and seduced by lies. I regret my part in Andrew Carter's downfall. My sympathy is with Emily and her child. Andrew read it alone in the darkened penthouse, his empire gone, his mistress turned enemy, and his name cursed across every screen. And while Emily healed in the quiet strength of love, Andrew realized the final betrayal had come. Not from strangers, but from the woman he thought would never leave. 2 weeks after the storm at the airport, Emily Carter stepped into the light again. The hospital had urged her to remain private, to recover quietly, but the world clamored for her story. Outside the glass doors, cameras clustered like vultures, their flashes exploding against the night. Yet when Emily emerged, holding her newborn son in her arms, the crowd hushed into reverent silence. She wore a simple cream dress, her hair pulled back, no jewels, no glamour, just a mother, fragile but unbroken. Ethan walked beside her, his tall frame shielding her from the chaos, but it was Emily the cameras couldn't turn away from. She wasn't the sobbing woman from the viral video anymore. She was something stronger, steadier. Reporters shouted questions. Emily, how are you feeling? Do you have anything to say to Andrew Carter? Who is the man supporting you? Emily paused at the microphone the hospital had reluctantly set up. Her hands shook as she adjusted the blanket over her son. But when she spoke, her voice carried with unexpected strength. I didn't choose to be in this position, she began softly, but I choose to speak now. What happened at the airport wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who's been silenced, every mother who's been discarded, every voice that's been told it doesn't matter. The crowd leaned in, spellbound. I survived that night because of my child, she continued, glancing down at the tiny face nestled against her. Because even when I thought my life was over, I knew his was just beginning, and I will spend every breath making sure he grows up in a world where women are respected, not broken. Her words pierced through the flashing lights, carried live to millions watching on television. Hashtags exploded anew. Emily speaks. Rise from the storm. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder, silent but resolute. His presence was no longer a mystery. The cameras recognized him instantly. Tech billionaire stands beside Emily Carter, headlines blared. Yet Emily didn't lean on him for attention. His role was clear. He wasn't the story. She was. When a reporter pressed, "Do you forgive Andrew?" Emily's eyes flickered with pain but also resolve. "Forgiveness is not mine to grant," she answered. Accountability is his to face. What I know is this: I am no longer his wife in spirit, only on paper. And soon, not even that. The crowd erupted into cheers, applause, breaking through the storm of flashes. Emily clutched her son tighter, her heart pounding. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was leading. That night, news anchors replayed her speech with awe. Commentators called it the moment the victim became the voice of millions. Donations poured into women's shelters in her name. Letters of gratitude flooded the hospital, and Emily Carter transformed from a face of tragedy into a symbol of resilience. And as Andrew raged at her defiance, Emily walked back into the hospital with Ethan at her side, unaware that her journey had only just begun, and that her next step would change everything. Andrew Carter sat alone in the dim light of his penthouse, the city's skyline stretching before him like a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. Once, he had looked at those glittering towers and seen conquest. Now they mocked him. His phone buzzed endlessly with debt collectors, angry investors, and former allies demanding their money back. Each call reminded him of the empire slipping through his fingers. Bottles littered the coffee table, their amber contents long drained. Andrew's tie hung from a chair, his shirt unbuttoned, his once perfect image unraveling as fast as his reputation. He had not shaved in days. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted by sleepless nights and the echo of Emily's speech replaying across every network. He hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering like his pride. "She thinks she's stronger than me? She thinks she can humiliate me?" His voice rasped, broken by rage. Vanessa's betrayal still burned. Her public statement condemning him had cut deeper than any knife. He had lost his company, his mistress, and his public image in the span of days. All he had left was bitterness. Scrolling through his phone, he saw Emily's face on every headline. Emily Carter speaks out, nation rallies behind her. Her simple words had dismantled the fortress of lies he had built for years. And beside her in every photo stood Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire Andrew had once hoped to charm as a business ally. The sight of Ethan's steady hand on Emily's shoulder ignited a fury Andrew could not contain. "She was mine," he whispered bitterly. "Mine to keep. Mine to break, mine to control, and now she parades around like some hero?" He stumbled to his desk, pulling open drawers and scattering papers. Hidden beneath contracts and unpaid bills was a revolver, polished and cold. He stared at it, the weight of desperation pulling him deeper into darkness. "If the world won't give me respect," he muttered, "I'll take it back." But even in his spiral, a flicker of fear crawled through him. He wasn't just hated, he was irrelevant. Investors had moved on, the media had crowned Emily a survivor, and Ethan's presence ensured she would never need Andrew again. For a man whose life had been built on control, irrelevance was worse than ruin. He collapsed into the chair, clutching his head. Memories of Emily's laugh, her hand on his arm in their early days, haunted him. For a fleeting second, regret pierced his arrogance, but it was too late. The man she had loved no longer existed. He had been swallowed by greed long ago. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, lightning illuminating his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the hollow eyes staring back. And as Andrew sank deeper into despair, muttering plans of revenge, he didn't realize that forces far greater than his rage were aligning. Forces that would ensure his downfall was permanent, and Emily's rise unstoppable. The ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers that dripped with light like liquid gold. It was the annual Blackwell Foundation Gala, an event where the city's elite gathered in gowns and tuxedos, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Yet that night, no one's eyes lingered on the glittering decor or the champagne towers. All attention shifted to the entrance, where Emily Carter appeared on Ethan Blackwell's arm. She wore a flowing sapphire gown that moved like water around her frame. A delicate diamond necklace caught the light with every step, but it wasn't the jewels or the dress that held the crowd captive. It was Emily herself. No longer the trembling woman from the viral video, she walked with poise, her head held high, her son safely at home under the care of trusted nurses. She looked every bit the survivor who had transformed her pain into undeniable strength. Ethan, resplendent in a black tuxedo, kept his hand at the small of her back. Not possessive, but protective, proud. He guided her through the sea of whispers and flashing cameras, their presence together a statement that needed no words. Reporters clamored at the velvet ropes. "Emily, how does it feel to be here tonight?" She paused briefly, her smile calm, measured. "It feels like a beginning," she replied. Inside, applause erupted as they entered the grand hall. Influential figures rose from their seats, not for Ethan, but for her. Emily's story had captured hearts across the nation, and tonight, she stood not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience. At the podium, Ethan spoke first, thanking guests for supporting the Foundation's work in women's shelters and neonatal care. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he turned to Emily. "There's someone here tonight who embodies what true strength looks like," he said, his voice carrying through the hushed hall. "Her courage has inspired not only me, but millions. Emily Carter, would you join me?" Gasps rippled through the audience as Emily ascended the stage. Her hands trembled, but Ethan's reassuring nod steadied her. She looked out at the sea of faces, powerful men and women, journalists, celebrities, all waiting. Her voice, soft yet resolute, filled the room. "2 weeks ago, I was left broken on a runway, discarded by the person I thought would protect me most. But that night, I realized something important. Strength doesn't come from those who abandon us. It comes from rising after we fall." The crowd leaned forward, hanging on her words. "I stand here tonight not just for myself, but for every woman who has been silenced, every child who deserves a safe beginning, every family torn apart by cruelty. We are not weak, we are not invisible, we are worthy." The hall erupted into thunderous applause, many on their feet, with tears in their eyes. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze fixed on her with unmistakable admiration. And as Emily descended the stage to a standing ovation, she felt it. This was the moment her story shifted from tragedy to triumph, and Andrew Carter's shadow was gone forever. The night of the gala had barely ended when news of Andrew Carter's last desperate move hit the city. He had stormed into the press with a wild statement, accusing Emily and Ethan of conspiring to destroy him. His rants, slurred with alcohol and bitterness, were broadcast live, and within hours, the world laughed at his collapse. Once a feared corporate giant, Andrew now looked like a man unraveling in public, clinging to lies no one believed. The final blow came swiftly. Federal investigators opened inquiries into his fraudulent business deals, uncovering years of hidden embezzlement. His assets were frozen, his penthouse seized, and his so-called allies abandoned him. Vanessa's testimony, once his shield, became a dagger. She revealed his threats, his cruelty, and his manipulation to the authorities. The man who once boasted that no one could touch him was now cornered, stripped of power, money, and pride. Meanwhile, Emily's world was changing in ways she had never imagined. With Ethan's support, she moved from the hospital into a serene home overlooking the water. Her son, though fragile, was thriving, his tiny cries now strong enough to fill her nights with music instead of fear. She decorated his nursery with soft blues and whites, each detail a promise of the life she would give him. Ethan was there for every step. He wasn't just the billionaire at her side. He was the man rocking her child at midnight, the man who listened to her fears without judgment, the man who reminded her daily that she was not alone. Slowly, Emily's heart healed, not because Ethan rescued her, but because he respected her strength enough to let her stand tall on her own. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of fire and gold, Ethan took Emily's hand. Her son slept peacefully in the crib beside them. "Emily," he said softly, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I never believed in fate, not until the night I saw you standing in that storm. You don't owe me anything, but if you'll allow it, I want to spend my life proving that you and your son are everything I've ever needed." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain this time, but from joy she had thought she'd never feel again. She reached for his hand, squeezing it firmly. "You already have, Ethan. You've given me something I thought was gone forever. Hope." The news of Andrew's sentencing broke weeks later. Prison time for fraud, bankruptcy filed, his name reduced to ash in the industry he once ruled. He was left alone, forgotten, a cautionary tale of greed and cruelty. Emily, by contrast, stood in the light. At a press conference for the Blackwell Foundation, she spoke once more, her baby in her arms and Ethan by her side. "This isn't the end of my story," she said, smiling through tears. "It's the beginning, and no storm can take this away from us." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the hall. And as Emily kissed her son's forehead, with Ethan's arms steady around her, she knew she had finally found what she deserved. Not just survival, but love, dignity, and a future brighter than she had ever dreamed.